Well, as we've been reporting, the Prime Minister has picked a fight with billionaire Elon Musk over his refusal to remove videos of the Wakely church stabbing off X, formerly known as Twitter. Have a listen.
This bloke thinks he's above the Australian law, that he's above common decency. This bloke on the other side of the world, from his billionaires' establishments, trying to lecture Australians about free speech. Well, I won't cop it, and Australians won't either.
And the tech billionaire fired back, mocking Anthony Albanese's social media crackdown hours after X was again ordered to remove graphic content with that post. Joining me now is Nationals leader David Littleproud. Thanks for joining us this evening. What is your position on this?
Yeah, look, I think some common sense needs to prevail. I think we all have a responsibility of enjoying freedom of speech, but with that comes responsibility, and responsibility of ensuring that real violence shouldn't be put up on platforms where particularly young children can access to. We need to make sure that real violence doesn't actually normalise stylised violence. And I think as platform owners, particularly like Elon Musk, I wholeheartedly support him in the fact that there should be a freedom of speech. But with that comes a responsibility, a severe responsibility of making sure that there shouldn't be censorship. But when it comes to real violence that Australians have endured has created great trauma, just some common sense should prevail, and that shouldn't be put out on any platform, because this is where, unfortunately, we've seen this slip in societal standards. And I think we've got a responsibility as we go close to Anzac Day. Over 100,000 Australians have lost their lives defending our right to freedom of speech. But that responsibility comes with great authority for us to make sure we get the balance right. And it shouldn't be an authoritarian approach. It should be about common sense. And I don't want, and I would never support the misinformation bill that the government's put in place. But I think Mr. Musk, who's been brought into this country and given the invitation to come here and to put his platform here, should come here with some responsibility. And I just think we don't need to go to court. We don't need to fight this out. We don't need ideology. We just need some common sense. And real violence should not be put up on these platforms, because that actually normalises stylised violence. So let's just get this right. Let's everyone calm down and get this right.
Well, I take your point, David, but do you feel, though, that the government, what they're trying to do here is a form of censorship? I mean, we've seen it globally, we've seen it other parts in the world. Why can't Australians make decisions on what is appropriate for themselves?
Oh, no, I agree, but there's got to be a clear line of delineation. And I think that comes with responsibility of not having governments have to reach into it or courts having to reach into it. It's about us. It's about us as a society understanding our responsibilities of that great freedom we've been given. And we do that responsibly ourselves. And, you know, watching someone get stabbed, and particularly someone from the clergy, is greatly distressing. And I just think, and whether it be that or some innocent Australians in a shopping centre, did we really want it? When you saw a father actually blindfold his children as he took them out of that shopping centre a couple of weeks ago, that had the foresight, did not want that trauma to be put on his children, then shouldn't we understand that these platforms are far-reaching, and we've all got a responsibility to protect one another, understand that they are there, and let's go after those that perpetrate this and go after them harshly. But let's just use some common sense on this and don't get the far-reaching courts and governments reaching in. Let's just do this together with some common sense.
All right, let's move on, because Labor's Biosecurity Protection Levy, which has earned itself the nickname the Fresh Food Tax, was investigated by your party in a Senate committee today. The levy is forcing farmers who are doing it tough as it is to pay for the biosecurity risks of international importers come July 1st. David, what happened in the Senate committee today?
Well, it's just unearthed the fact that Labor don't know what they're going to do. They want to tax Australian farmers over $153 million in taxes to pay for their foreign competitors, to bring their foreign products to this country and process them through our ports to make sure there's no biosecurity risks, so that they compete on Australian shelves in Australian supermarkets against Australian farmers. All they've done is pushed up Australian fresh produce prices so that foreign prices are cheaper. Now, in what parallel universe would any government any government charge their own farmers to help foreign competitors bring their product to this country. When we export, farmers export to other countries, we pay to process our product through those ports to make sure there's no biosecurity risk. But instead in Australia, Anthony Albanese and Murray Watt have said, no, they shouldn't pay for it. Australian farmers should pay for it. But they have to pass it on to you. And the cost of living crisis, this mob have lost the plot. That they would say not only the farmers have to pay, but they'll have to pass it on to you when there is a pathway. And both Peter Dutton and I made this very clear in the last budget, that we will introduce a container levy where those who pose the biosecurity risk will pay the price. And that is how biosecurity should be paid and should be covered. And that's what we'll do. We'll scrap this. Australian farmers shouldn't pay this. Australian consumers shouldn't pay this for Australian produce. It should be those that bring the product to this country and pose the risk of bringing pests and disease to this country should actually pay to make sure we've checked it and done it right.
Yeah, another tax in the middle of a cost of living crisis. It's just absolutely beggars belief. Now, David, we have just seen the news that the Independent Parliamentary Expenses Authority Assurance Review found that you contravened laws by claiming taxpayer-funded expenses for a private trip to the Gold Coast. The Australian is reporting this evening that the IPA review said that the visit contravened Section 26 of the Parliamentary Business Resources Act. Now, I know you've paid back, you've repaid the expenses and for the flights, but what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, look, this was a return trip between sitting weeks, and most MPs return to their homes between sitting weeks. I don't normally because it's too far for me to go home. I had a family event, I came back to Queensland, and because I live in southern Queensland, I felt that I could come to two ports, Gold Coast or Brisbane. And the difference between a Gold Coast flight and a Brisbane flight is a couple $100. That's why we thought that you could go to either port. I made a mistake. IPA found that I couldn't. I could only go to Brisbane, which was a couple $100 difference. I didn't claim for any accommodation while I was home on weekend for my own personal family time, but I repaid it beyond that. The only thing that I did wrong was I came to the wrong port. I came to Brisbane rather than Gold Coast. And I admit that, and I put my hand up, but I wasn't aware that that was wrong. I thought I could come to either two because they were similar in price. And I paid not just the price of the flight of coming back, but I paid for the flight going back to Canberra and any other associated costs. But I didn't claim any nights. I wasn't there on the taxpayer. I came home to be with my family, which is what most MPs do between sitting weeks. And it's the 1 week that I actually did get to come home to see my family, because normally I have to travel and I wouldn't get home till Friday night. And have to travel Sunday morning. So it was a family event. I put my hand up and I didn't pay just what was owed to the taxpayer. I paid more because I didn't want there to be any conjecture.
Well,
and that was the mistake I made. I put my hand up.
How much was that?
Well, the differential between a flight to the Gold Coast and Brisbane is a couple $100. So had I flown back to Brisbane and then found my own way to my family event, I would have saved the taxpayer about $200 difference. But I paid back both flights, but it was about a couple $1,000. I'm prepared to do that. I didn't want there to be any conjecture. I want to be upfront with the Australian people. I only travel on the tax dime to make sure that I'm representing the Australian people. But I do have a family, like most MPs, and on weekends between parliamentary sittings, I think most MPs want to go home and see their families. And I think Australians want us to see our families. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just that I got the wrong advice about where I could go, whether the Gold Coast or Brisbane, very similar ports, a couple $100 difference, but to make sure there was no conjecture, I paid more. Now, I'm prepared to do that because I want to be upfront with the Australian people. I have an electorate 3 times the state of Victoria, and I'm lucky to see my kids and my wife every second weekend if I'm lucky on that.
I guess, David Littleproud, I mean, people will see this, we're in the middle of a cost of living crisis, then expenses across both sides of the political spectrum are coming under such scrutiny right now on the taxpayer dime. Do you concede it's not a good look at all?
No, so they should. But there's a realisation, if you want someone to do this job, you've got to have a family at the end of it. I mean, if you want people to put their hand up and put their name on the ballot paper, they've got to have a family that's there to support them. Now, I only came back to Queensland because I wanted to be with my family between sitting weeks. I only do that rarely. Most MPs do that every sitting fortnight. I came back to the wrong port. The difference was a couple $100. Now, I'm being up front and honest. That's what I want to be to the Australian people. I'm not taking anything more than what I wanted to, but I just wanted to be with my family. I think that's a reasonable expectation of any Australian. If you don't think it's reasonable for politicians to be with their family, then who'd want to do it? I only get to see my family, as luckily as I am, every second weekend, because my electorate is 3 times the state of Victoria. Now, most city MPs will fly back every weekend to be with their families, get to be with them, and they'll sneak home, and that's quite easy for them. It'll take me another 3 hours, 2.5 to 3 hours to get from Brisbane Airport to my home. Right. So am I not to see my family? Do they not have the right to see me?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, David Littleproud. We obviously just have to ask the question. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no, it's a legitimate question.
Really appreciate you joining us on the show, David Littleproud. Thank you.